Cool. Looks like we are live. I see some more folks joining. We'll give it just a few minutes here before we kind of kick things off officially. Appreciate everybody's time, both you guys at Eastmans and everybody tuning in just to jump on here. And we're going to talk a lot of things about late season hunting. And when we talk late season hunting, we're really referring to rifle seasons into the late season. You know, we're thinking when snow flies and, you know, deer and elk start moving around due to weather, that type of stuff. So I'm excited. I know I'm going to learn plenty from you guys, and hopefully folks tuning in, have some good questions. We'll have quite a bit of time at the end, hopefully, for some question and answer. So we'll give it just a second. In the meantime, how has the season been going for you guys? I know you guys have been busy running around to different places and states and having some success.
Yeah, it's been you know, a typical crazy fall. The rut and the moon and the weather's all been I wouldn't say typical, I would say normally weird. I just got home yesterday from Colorado, southern Colorado, where we were able to we draw out of our tag hub and our regular subscriber list. We draw hunt winners, and we were able to take two guys on elk hunts down there and two guys on antelope hunts. So I just got back from that. Guy just got back from hunt today, right? Like an hour ago.
Yeah, I went home, took a shower, and came in here. Unsuccessful antelope. The buck I wanted, the big buck I found, is 500 yards inside a different unit. So we'll go back in a couple weeks. Maybe the weather will push him back where he was originally and give it another go. I got till the end of the month. So patience.
And then Guy and I leave tomorrow on a late season deer hunt in southern Wyoming. Snow's already flied down there, and it's always a fun hunt. It's where we used to do the old guys versus young guys hunt. I don't know, Guy is the old guy and I'm the young guy. Two old guys hunting, I don't know, but so we'll go down there, and Grant, we do an antelope hunt next week, right?
Yep, Monday, central Wyoming. So that'll be fun. I haven't hunted that unit in about 10 years, and should be a blast.
Yep, that's Going to be a fun one with the paper trails.
Yep, paper trails film, which you guys are a part of. And we've already had just a lot of fun putting that together, and this is sort of the last piece I see on the cake. Got to go hunting. Oh darn.
Yeah, tough way to wrap up the film. I'm excited for that one, and then also for that Wyoming annual hunt you guys do. I think I've watched the videos from those hunts over the past, I don't know, 2 or 3 years on YouTube about a dozen times each. So I'm excited to see how this year goes. You guys always turn up some really nice bucks down there.
It's fun. It's a unique place in the world, and those guys, the Wendell, their families, we've been friends forever, and they do a really good job managing their property for wildlife. In fact, oddly, I ran into the game warden here, the Wyoming game warden in this area. I have an elk tag here, and I was hunting during archery season, and he checked my license, and he's a really nice guy. And he said, "Oh, actually, I met you like 15 years ago down by Evanston." I was like, oh my gosh, we both looked a lot different, a lot younger. And he said, "Yeah, I just love that place down there. It's not very often you have a landowner that's just, got 700 head of elk on his property in the winter." And he just looks at you and goes, "Well, elk got to eat too." Usually they're complaining about that, but not Wendell. They really do a great job with the wildlife and managing that and having cattle and doing the whole thing. So it's really cool to see.
No, I'm excited. Hopefully I get some teaser photos so I don't have to wait for the episode to come out. Good luck on that. Well, we'll kind of kick things off. I've got a few just really quick housekeeping stuff, and then we'll get into an agenda and kind of kick this thing off. So just a reminder that everybody's videos and audio are turned off, so no need to worry about that. If you do have questions, and we encourage you to ask questions, we're going to get to a bunch of the live questions toward the end of this here. So if you do have any questions, open up that Q&A function. Throw those questions in there and not the chat. It's just easier for us on our end. If you can help us out with that. If you have any personal onX account questions, like billing questions or anything like that, reach out to help@onxmaps.com. we'll do a better job at answering those and addressing your needs there. And then one other thing, so if you're watching this after it's live, which is October 6th, which is crazy that September came and went as fast as it did to say that, but October 6th, the Q&A and then the giveaway obviously will be closed. This will be on YouTube after the fact. So if you want to rewatch it, if you missed anything, want to take notes or send it to people, it will show up on YouTube here in a day or so. So we'll kick it off with some introductions right after this. We'll dive into some of the top or most frequently asked questions ahead of time, and then we'll jump into a giveaway toward the end and wrap things up with some more Q&A from the live. So again, throw those questions in the Q&A section and we appreciate it. So I know you guys don't need really any introduction. I guarantee everybody on here and that will watch this knows exactly what Eastmans is and who you guys are, what you're about. But would one of you guys mind just a quick overview of Eastmans, when it got started, what it is today, and then just some brief, personal intros?
Yeah. I'm Ike Eastman, third generation in the Eastman outdoor publishing and filming, president of the company. I've been obviously hunting since in Wyoming, you could start hunting at 14. I've been hunting since then every year. I don't remember not hunting with a camera on my back, which is kind of fun. The Eastman Company is kind of evolved over 3 generations. It was started by Guy and I's grandfather in 1957. He was filming wildlife stuff in Alaska and the North, Canada, that type of stuff. He went from filming, old school and bringing that film back to high school auditoriums and was doing live narration of that film. People had never seen a polar bear. They'd never seen, what a Dall sheep looks like, or, the Eskimos, really what that was all about. And so he evolved from that, started making theatricals, and then filmed in video in the 80s, doing Rocky Mountain elk hunting, Rocky Mountain deer, just wildlife type stuff. Also in the 80s, my father started the current company, which is Eastman's Publishing. And it was started as a magazine. Well, actually, it started as a newsletter because guys at these sports shows like in Harrisburg or Texas would ask me questions like, hey, I really want to shoot an elk. How do I do that? So he put together this little pamphlet that was kind of what we're doing here, actually. It was just a frequently asked questions. How do I start elk hunting? Those guys didn't even know that there was public land out here, that the majority of the West is public land, and it was their land, and they could come out and hunt it. They didn't even know that. They thought it was kind of like back east where everything's landlocked or very private and you had to have a lease. And if you didn't have a lease, hunting was hard. So he started it that way. It grew from 1987 and grew into a full-fledged magazine. And in 1999, he started the Eastman's Bow Hunting Journal, as well as started on the Outdoor Channel, which was called, the first programming on the Outdoor Channel wasn't really first run stuff. It was reruns from a TV channel called TNN. And we were one of the first original TV shows that had original content that only went on the Outdoor Channel. It's grown since then. We've grown it into a completely digital side of our world, where we have, a huge YouTube presence, huge social media presence. Our email list is ginormous, and we just produce a ton of content. Plus, while we maintain the 2 magazines still and the linear TV, we have another TV show called Beyond the Grid that's on YouTube. We have a podcast division that has 5 different podcasts, everything from, controversial hunting topics all the way to, tips and tactics on Eastman's Elevated. You can learn how, Brian Barney and his guests are able to be so successful every year. So that's kind of where we came from. I'll let Guy and Brandon kind of introduce themselves and tell what they want to talk about, and leave with that.
I'm Guy Eastman. I'm Mike's brother. Ditto on everything he said, pretty much. I'm kind of a jack of all trades around here, knower of not much. I've been hunting since I was with my grandfather, since I was 10, 12, carrying a camera since I was 8. But I'm kind of tapering off on the hunting a little bit now. We're more on helping other people, whether it be in the company or hunt winners, that kind of thing. So that's kind of my next phase, which has been really gratifying and enjoying. And I do a lot of content for the magazine and the video series as well. So.
Brandon Mason, I've been working for the company for a dozen years already, which is hard to believe. Feels like I just started, but
Baker's dozen?
yeah, Baker's dozen. Yeah, and is that a fat joke?
Don't
No, I grew up watching the Eastmans and their videos and reading the magazines, and to work here was kind of like a pinch me moment. You know, it's a little hard to believe at first, and sometimes still is. So it's great to be a part of it.
That's awesome. Yeah, great stuff. And I mean, I've been with onX for over 7 years, and I know the Eastmans and onX relationship goes way back, well beyond that. So yeah, good things. And I'm personally excited to be working with you guys, all of you. And yeah, we'll kind of dive in here to some of the questions. And we pulled these questions from the registration. So when we had folks register to attend, there was a spot there for questions. And we kind of looked for ones that were asked multiple times. They might be worded differently, but relatively the same questions. So we'll kind of dive through some of these. And again, I'll just kind of direct the questions to you guys, and Ike or whoever there, if you guys want to direct traffic and figure out who should take what, by all means, go ahead. And then we'll cover a couple more things and then get into some more Q&A at the end. We won't waste time. We'll just dive in here. So do you guys focus on where the bulls have possibly taken as herd, or look more toward, okay, here's some good feeding grounds for late season elk?
Ooh, that's a good question. That's a good question. I'm gonna pitch this to Guy. He is the master of finding elk when they've broke up and the bulls are no longer the cows and they're doing that solitary thing, which is kind of what we typically call late season. That mid season is where the bulls have the cows, but they're not bugling, they're not really doing crazy things. But late season, which is where we're at right now, going on, is where they go solitary. What's a good strategy for both mid season and late season, Guy?
The mid-season, those bulls transition off the cows. It'll depend. I mean, just like the rut, it's a 2-week window. They're still with them right now. We've had a late rut. It's about 2 weeks late. These bulls are going to be with the cows probably, I'm guessing, until about the 20th of October this year. I've seen them pull off at the 15th of October before. Now that's the older bulls. What'll happen is when those cows are all bred, those old bulls are done. They know. They leave the herd, and the younger bulls, the satellites, will move in and kind of try to command the herd, even though the cows don't really pay much attention to them. So it can almost be like a false rut when the cows are all bred, the satellites have moved in and they battle each other and bugle and act goofy. But the big bull who did all the breeding, he's gone, and he starts traveling looking for cows. And so it's a great time to kill a satellite bull because they're going to be right in with the cows. But if you want that herd bull, once he pulls off, you got to go find him, and they really get solitary. You can imagine all the commotion and all the energy they expend running all the cows, and they lose a lot of weight. They're not eating much at all. They're not drinking a lot. They're really in bad shape. And so what those bulls will do is pull off into recovery mode. And that can be tough to find them because they'll go really solitary. Kind of like when you get back from SHOT Show and you just want to go hang out in the closet for a couple of days, with no noise and just a dark room, right? And that's kind of what they do. But when you find those places, they'll be very, very, they'll go to the same spot every single year. And I think that's mostly because of the feed. Back to the original question. So I'm looking for real tight creek drainages that have good feed, water, and cover, very in a tight space. These are usually spur drainages off of a long drainage. And so when you find those spots, those big bulls bachelor back up a lot of times with 2 or 3 of them in a group. Old bulls that have busted each other to pieces all fall, become buddies again, right? It's just like a playground, and they kind of just hang together. And they'll stay there until what I consider late season, which is anything after November 1st. Then when the snow really starts flying, they will leave those areas and go to what would be considered their wintering range. Those are going to be the big south-facing slopes, big open country that has maybe a little bit of north, backside north-facing cover for them to bed in and come out on the south-facing slopes. And they may come out almost all day just trying to pack the weight back from the rut. So you kind of gotta figure out where you're at in that rut. And we're getting, like I said, this year's a late rut. We're not there yet, but as that goes on, and that rut progresses, you've got to always kind of measure where you are. You can always do that. I always measure where we are in the rut by what the smaller bulls are doing. If the satellite bulls and the raghorns have moved back into the cows, you are over. It's done. Even though the raghorn, the small 6s and 5s might be bugling and acting goofy, it's over. If the rut is still going on, there's no way those little raghorns can come near that herd of cows. And so once that happens, if you start seeing younger bulls with cows, you need to go start looking for the big bulls in their closet, so to speak. And that's going to be purely based mostly on feed.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I mean, myself is typically I'm like an archery hunter for elk, rifle hunter for mule deer, I guess I would say. Like, that's super knowledgeable, just insight there. I've struggled finding good bulls or really any bulls of size late season. So that's really helpful to know. Next one here. So for elk again, is calling beneficial in the late season? And if so, what type should be used? I assume that's like, locating bugles. Obviously I don't think a challenge bugle would be effective late season, but cow calls, do you guys call it all late season, or are you typically glassing and trying to spot and stock?
So typically when we talk late season, like Guy was saying, let's talk about this year. Late season's after going to be about the 20th of October, into that November. That call is not going to work on a herd bull. It's not going to work on. Now, I've seen it work at locating them, and that's about it. It typically doesn't though. And if you go in there and squeak like a cow, they're more likely they're going to pick their head up and run. Because that commotion, they're done with that, and it's over. Now you can get bulls to bugle back in that early or that mid season and that late season, but it's going to be those young bulls that still are in the cows thinking they're doing something. Not saying it's 100%, but that is the majority of the time. You're not going to get a big old herd bull to bugle at you after the rut. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, that makes sense. Any specific tactics when things are unseasonably warm? So I know last year, for example, at least in Montana, it was a very warm drought year, really all the way through November. I mean, it didn't cool off much. Are you guys changing things up if it's unusually warm, or are you kind of sticking to the same playbook?
When it's unusually warm, I mean, I'll let Brandon jump this because he had a late season elk last year that was unseasonably warm until the end of it, and it was a struggle. But focus on water.
Yeah, and it depends on the area, of course, but it's really important to know kind of how the elk move through a unit throughout the season too. And when there's a really dry year like last year, it was frustrating because I couldn't find elk in normal places, whether it was pre-rut, peak of the rut, or post-rut. And the good thing about that challenge is I understood after the season a little bit more on how those elk were moving throughout that unit, both starting in the high country, going down to low country, partially because of water where the cows are mostly at, and then coming back up until the heavy snow comes. And in the bull that I killed was with a couple other bulls, and it was really a lot like hunting mule deer before the rut, where he was just hanging out with a couple other bulls. It was more glassing, spot and stock, and definitely didn't call. He was right at the snow line edge, and was real typical, that time of year. And like Guy said, this year's 2 weeks later. I think what I would consider last year being a late season bull, I think I killed him October 12th, and that's next week already. Yeah. And it's not going to be late season next week.
No,
this year.
And it's kind of warm this year. I mean, we're in the 60s today still. The high country has snow, but it is not it's not what a typical mid-October is.
Yeah,
We don't even
no,
have snow here yet.
I would say the exact same for Montana, and I would echo, I don't know if you guys have hunted elk in Montana this year, but I would echo the 2 weeks late. Like the first couple weeks of season, I couldn't buy a bugle for anything. Just seemed like nothing was happening. So definitely up here, a little north of you guys, the elk rut was a couple of weeks late, so I'm sure that'll carry over. Let's see. Tactics for thick terrain, limited visibility. So I'm sure that's, mountainous stuff where you can't glass those big open hillsides. What's your guys' tactics late season? And I'm sure that changes if you got snow on the ground, fresh snow on the ground, versus no snow. But walk us through a little bit, like, what are you guys looking at if you're hunting a unit that's really timbered up?
That's a lot. Honestly, it's a lot more work when you say a guy. It's a lot more work.
It's tough.
Because you're not allowing your glass to do the walking, so you're gonna have to do it, and it's gonna require, finding an area where there's a lot of elk sign and find that bull. Because like Guy was talking about, would you say probably 50 yards or 50 acres is about all in that late season that they really don't move 50 acres. That's about it.
No, yeah, they get real, almost like a mule deer early season. Their world collapses down to one little drainage. And usually it's a drainage around here that I've hunted in that season. It's a drainage that has a side drainage that has a spring creek in it that won't freeze. So we've always got water, even though once the snow comes, they don't really need water. But, like if we have a warm year like this, they still need the water. And so they'll get in those little cool drainage that has a spring creek in it. And just literally, it is a great time to kill a big bull if you can find them, because they're like clockwork. I've sat there and watched them every day for 4 or 5 days, and you can set your watch by it. Here they come at 4:15 in the afternoon, and they feed. And there they are, feeding until 10 in the morning, and then they go bed down. I mean, literally just wearing out the hillside back and forth from bedding to feed. The little bit they move. So it's very patternable.
And they'll mow that grass down. That's the other thing is you get into a place where you see a park and it looks like a lawnmower has been through that thing. There's a bull in there, especially, if you find elk sign in it, there's a bull in there. Back out of there. Hopefully you didn't mess it up, and sit and wait, see what happens.
Yeah.
And it may take, a day or two. We always say, don't leave a glassing area or a spot. You give it 3 good hunts, a morning, evening, morning, or, an evening, morning, evening. Give it 3 good hunts to see if there is something actually in and out of there, because you may just be missing it. Or you could have what's going to happen to us next week, and we have a full moon, and those bulls eat all night, and then they go in early, but they'll come out early. Is what the other thing that they'll do.
Yeah, and hunting a big cover too, it's just like hunting open country. You're looking for the limiting resource to key in on. Open country, you're looking for more bedding cover because there's not much of it, and thermal cover late season. And when you're hunting thicker cover, which I don't personally do well with, I'm from North Dakota, man. I need wide open spaces to feel comfortable. But when you are, just hunt the limiting resource, water source and feed source, because there's plenty of cover. There's plenty of thermal cover, but in that heavy timber, most of the time, there's not a lot of great feed, especially late season. So key in on those feed sources and the water sources, and that's pretty much the only chance you can't glass.
Yeah, you just have to go low and slow and learn to read. I had that happen this fall before the rut hadn't started yet, and we were in the back bedroom of a big bull. Now he had cows, but he wasn't charged up because the other bulls hadn't wound him up yet. And we're down to the level of actually each day looking at which way the elk tracks are in our boot tracks from the day before to see which way they're moving, listening to them cross the creek and counting how many elk are crossing the creek or a puddle. I mean, you're down to just very condensed area, but you have to learn to read the signs. That's the sight, sounds, and smells of what's in there and kind of figure out their pattern. Now, I have heard, I've not done this, but I've heard of guys in the late season getting right into a bull's bedroom close by, do a lost cap call, and have the bull actually get up and wander over out of curiosity just to see what the heck's going on.
Yeah, real casual.
I wouldn't put that I wouldn't put that past myself to try. You know, if you get desperate enough, but you better have the wind right and you better be in close before you try it.
And be prepared, because when that bull's in your lap,
He'll come inside.
Yep, he'll be in your lap and trying to wind you. He will
Yeah.
circle where he pinpoint that noise and circle it to try and wind you. So
Yeah,
it,
no,
it can work, but
that's all really good stuff. And yeah, super challenging if it's thick, and especially if there's no snow on the ground. Obviously, if there's fresh snow, you're looking for tracks. And you know, I haven't found a lot of success with this, but last year I was with a buddy on a moose hunt, and fresh bull tracks across the road, and we went up after it, following it, and ended up jumping that bull out of his bed at like 40 yards, and he shot him. And that was kind of the first aha moment of tracking in the snow for me. You know, not doing a ton of rifle elk hunting, mostly archery, where a lot of guys are doing that, you know, cutting fresh tracks and still hunting on those, making sure the wind's good and killing them that way. So yeah, it's a whole nother challenge when there's no snow on the ground yet.
yeah. Yeah, you know, when there's snow on the ground, you can track them. You know, if there's elk in there, you know, if they're moving around, you know, if they're, you know, what they're doing. The other thing, actually, I'm going to bring that up since we were talking about snow. The other thing that elk don't like is if you get into a heavy snow and it's been snowing for 2 or 3 days and that snow piles up on those trees, when it warms up, it will eventually, the sun will come out, those trees will get warm enough that it starts dripping. Watch the opens, because those elk cannot handle it being in that timber when that's dripping. Number one, it's loud. If you've ever been in there, I mean, it's loud. It seems like everything's walking around you. Number two, they don't like getting dripped on. Sitting there getting dripped on all day, it's cold and it's annoying. You know, it's their version of waterboarding. And so it's annoying. And so once that happens, make sure you're out all day. Those elk will be in the opens all day. They'll even lay there in the open, take a nap in the open.
Yeah, that's a huge tip, and something that, you know, a lot of folks and myself probably haven't thought of. I'll try and keep that one in the back of my memory. Moving on to the next one here. So it says, are there factors such as temperature, snow depth that will drive mature bucks and bulls from the high country? I mean, yes to that, but I guess talk about like the snow depth. You know, what does it take? I guess taking this question one step further, what does it take for temperature and snow depth to drive elk and deer out of the high country?
Ooh, that's a good one. Anybody want to tackle that?
Well,
that's a really big, I know it's a short question, but it's a really big topic.
Yeah, obviously there's a major difference between mule deer and elk. I mean, what elk are just like the superpower, you know, in the outdoors, in my opinion. They're so adaptable. They're so big. They're so tough, and they can handle, you know, a lot deeper snow, more frigid temperatures than even a mule deer can. A mule deer are tough. And so, you know, generally speaking, you don't see mule deer and elk coexisting together in large numbers. You know, you're not going to see a large range with a lot of mule deer, larger mule deer population, along with a large elk population. But where they do coexist together, you're going to see the mule deer coming out first. And it's fun to kind of watch, especially elk, because they'll look for those open hilltops, like we said, or those open ridges where they can feed. And a lot of times they'll even weather a storm that's putting feet of snow on the ground, because they've done it so many times. They know that in a few days, when the sun burns off some of that snow, they can feed again up there. So it won't push them down as quickly, depending on the range. Now, there's some ranges close to where we live where I think those elk are the weakest elk on the planet. They see a snowflake and they're like, oop, I'm out of here. Partially because they know the hunters are coming and there's private line close. And so they go bailing off the mountain pretty quick. But
the other thing is pay attention to drastic changes. Here, 8 years ago, we on one day it was 70 degrees and 2 days later it was 10 below zero. That's drastic, and I don't care what you are, that is hard to adapt to. And so they're going to look, even elk at that point will be looking for somewhere that's warmer and something that's different for cover and you know, better feed, because once it gets below zero, those animals have to eat a lot of groceries in order to keep that furnace burning, to keep them warm. And they always say if it's below 10, if it's 10 below 0, those animals have to feed 70% of the day. So they're not sleeping much. They're just constantly feeding. The other thing is, there's elk are unique, and we have a place here where the elk will actually get snowed in, and it's just this windswept giant range that has been burnt for 25, 30 years now, and they'll live up there all winter. And if we get a cold snap and snow, those are the two factors, cold and snow, same time, it'll kill a bunch of them because they can't get out because it's been drifted in. They've been snowed in for 2 months, 3 months. So.
Yeah, that's all interesting stuff. We actually touched on it. Yeah, go ahead.
You guys hit that pretty good.
Cool. We actually touched on this next one. You guys answered this one above. The question was any tips for post-rut elk hunting when the bulls are in the sanctuaries, and I think Guy, you covered that, and then some in the beginning one. So we'll kind of skip over that one for now. How do I identify good glassing spots while e-scouting?
E-scouting. Brandon, I guess you've been doing a lot of that this year, especially with the lands, paper trails, doing a lot of e-scouting and doing a lot of stuff with your antelope area. Obviously we're talking about elk and deer as well. So you want to cover what you've been doing and the strategy there?
Yeah, honestly, and this isn't meant to be a shameless onX plug just because we're on a webinar with you guys, but that exaggerated 3D feature has been a game changer for me personally, because one thing that I've never been really good at, whether it was on your 3D maps or before you guys offered, back in the Google Earth days or whatever, is I always said that it was a rude awakening. You're e-scouting and you think the area, you've talked to people, maybe it's just far enough away to where you can't go scouting, physically get there for the season, and then you show up, and I've always said, man, it's at least 30% bigger or different than what you planned on. And with that exaggerated feature, I've learned that, I don't exaggerate it on that slider bar all the way to the 100%, because then it gets pretty, extruded, but to about 30%, on that slider bar, and it's a pretty good representation. And from that, I can, turn that 3D mapping, 100 or 360 degrees, and knowing where the sun's coming up, the predominant wind direction, all those features, when you're looking at that, it helps greatly. And so that way you can get a pretty accurate picture of what it looks like, especially if you've talked to people in the area and kind of know where to look. And again, looking for those limiting resources. If you're going to be hunting a heavy timbered area, which I've done before, I'm not looking at all the ridge tops where I can glass, because most of them I can't. And so I'm looking for those open parks and meadows and stream beds and food sources, whatever. And on the other end of the extreme, when I'm hunting late season mule deer, say in eastern Montana or western North Dakota, you're looking for, I'm going to glass from obviously an open hillside, because that's mostly what's out there, but I'm going to be keying in on where the sun's hitting some thermal bedding cover throughout the day. And that's what I would be keying in on. And then you'll catch those deer getting up to feed periodically throughout the day, and of course in the morning and evening hours. So that's kind of how I do it.
And remember that 3D feature doesn't work. You have to have service in order for that thing to work really well. So make sure you're doing it before you get, in your area if you don't have service. And the other one I use a lot on my elk hunt this year is and forgive me if I don't, Dylan, you have to tell me what the exact thing on the app is called, but it's a heat map of terrain, so you can tell how steep stuff is. And what is that called?
Slope angle.
Yeah, slope angle. So it allows you to go, okay, the blue is really, really steep. I probably can't get to the top of that, but I can get right around that bottom of that blue and know that is, a high elevation or a steep place, which gives me lots of fall, so I can see a long distance. That thing works really, really well, and it works, in the field, as long as you have the map downloaded.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That one does both of those, the 3D exaggeration and the slope angle are really key for that. The other thing too is I always mark some backup spots. And when you get my biggest thing is, you mark a good glassing location, you get up there, and the problem that I run into, just like everybody else, is the timber, the vegetation on your side. So you might be on a logging road or something, and from the map and from 3D and everything, it's like, man, I'll be able to glass this entire drainage, whole basin. Then you get there and you got a bunch of 10-foot jack pines in front of you all the way down. So it's like, your original glassing point might not work. You might have to, walk up or down the ridge 200-300 quarter mile to find that opening in the trees on your side. So yeah, I mean, nothing beats boots on the ground, but it is good to have some points at least ahead of time, some ideas, and then just adjust it accordingly in the field. And then when you do find a good one, make sure you mark it for next time you go there if you need to go in the dark or something, so you can just be right at that glassing point when you need to. Kind of another glassing. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry about that. Didn't mean to interrupt you. Another thing that Dan Picard brings up a lot, he does a ton, and he's got probably more than any human being I know. And this is really important when you're hunting, the rugged mountains, because you have to make the most as a human being of your energy resources that you're expending, so you don't burn yourself out. And when he's looking at where he's gonna glass and scout and everything else, he's looking at ridges where he can see multiple directions and run that ridge. It's not just a one spot and you're done and you have to bail off and get up on another ridge, because you're going to wear yourself out doing that. And so you just, kind of play the odds and make the most of your time up there, so you can, once you get to elevation, high elevation, stay there as much as you can.
Yep.
And then run off of different fingers, on that same ridge.
Yeah. You can side hill around to another finger or something like that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And actually, I've been doing that for a little while, even in eastern Montana, just throwing on the topo base map and kind of creating like a hunt plan, if you will. Like, okay, I'm going to hike this ridge system out. Here's a good glassing spot where I can glass everything to the south. And then it looks like a quarter mile up that ridge system, I can glass and everything to the north. And then, oh, there's a little timber pocket over here I want to glass. So kind of just on topo looking at the ridge systems and marking different glassing points, depending on the time of day, I'll stay there, shoot, between 20 minutes at each point to hours, depending on what the country is and whatnot. But yeah, even in country that isn't that difficult, it's so much more efficient just to travel those ridges when you can. So that's a good point. And actually, we are working on something that will be pretty cool for finding glassing locations. I can't really talk about it too much. I'll fill you guys
You're
in.
not sharing all my pins, are you?
No, we wouldn't do that to you, but we are working on something that will help with finding glassing locations. Tease that out a little bit, and we can chat outside of the live video, and I can fill you guys in a little more, but it will be cool. I'm excited for it. Another glassing question: how long do you guys glass an area before deciding to move on? I know we covered this in the last webinar we did, but I'm curious, does that change, archery season, kind of what we talked about the previous webinar, versus the late season? And I know that there's a lot of nuances to that question. You might want to stay at a glassing point all day, depending on if you saw a bull go into timber or something like that. But how long are you guys typically giving a location before you're trying to go to another ridge or another spot?
Yeah, you had that elk hunt here in Wyoming a couple of years ago. You shot that big bull. What was your strategy there? Because it took a long time to find him, and then once you did, it took a while to. What was your strategy on that?
Well, for me, to answer that question, early season, I try to give it at least one night, one evening, one morning, unless I see something I really don't like, or I see that I think there really is something there I'm missing. I might extend it or cut it short. But for the rule of thumb, most part, I give it a night, morning. And when you get to the late season, I'm a little more sporadic. I'm a little more ADD on that net then, because if you get snow on the ground, I can usually go in a drainage, look right away and say, the elk aren't in here. just by the tracks. They'll stick out like a sore thumb, and you can kind of tell if they're feeding tracks or they're moving tracks. Like I've gone into drainages and seen tracks, they're all headed one direction, just straight as an arrow. Those are out moving out. They're gone. They're down somewhere else. I need to go relocate. But if they're sporadic, and I can see where they had, feeding areas where they came out into a basin and pod and bed, and you'll see these spots. It looks like they laid down where they actually fed. If there's those, then you better give that one a day and night at least, because they're there. They're there somewhere. Usually you get the snow changes everything in the late season, because it's like the old school contact paper where you trace something out and it just tells the whole story. And those animals, they can't undo their tracks, right? And you can see them from 2 miles away. So when I'm in the late season, I'm looking for tracks, trying to figure out what those animals are doing. And I can look a long ways away for tracks. Like I can see sheep tracks on the top of these mountains right now from 5 miles away, moving around up there. So it really tells you a lot about what's going on in any given drainage. So I don't know if that answers that question, but
Yeah. No, I think it definitely does. And I know that one, there's a lot of nuances. How long do you have, how big is the unit you're hunting? How long of the season? How many more days of your hunt do you have? All those kind of play into that. So I know it's a tough question. I know, this last one here, we also touched on several different times throughout, but what's the best approach to late season scouting? Do you guys, late season scouting, are you guys putting boots on the ground, right before rifle seasons? At that point, if you're into the late season, you probably have a rifle on your shoulder, or a bow if you're still archery hunting. But are you guys scouting a lot in late season, or are you just trying to find where those animals are and getting on them?
I usually don't. I usually am not scouting in an area that isn't open. Worst thing you want to do is go find a bull in there and sit on him for 4 days or 5 days and then have it open and somebody come in and mess it up. So it's a frustration thing for me. But I don't usually scout for late season, and partially it's because we're spoiled in Wyoming in the sense that we get an archery hunt right before rifle, and so you've kind of been in there anyway most of the time. But in these areas that I haven't been in, I want to go in there. I want to go in there with a tag in my pocket, a rifle, and because those bulls aren't moving around a ton, or the deer aren't moving around a ton. The deer are prepping for rut, and the bulls are, they're recovering from the rut. And so you just I want to go in there and have the opportunity and then take my time to put a plan together that's not going to booger that bull or that deer out of his little area. Because once you do that, then the game changes and it's a lot harder. You either have to go find another bull or hope that one doesn't go really far. So yeah. I don't. Does anybody? I don't know.
No, I think you said it right. We're spoiled here in a lot of the states. Montana's kind of the same way, where you can be archery hunting early season, and sometimes that butts right up to the rifle season, and you've kind of done your scouting through that.
Yeah.
You kind of know what's going on, and obviously there's a lot of merit. A guy like Dad Mike preached at a generation of hunters of getting to know a couple key areas that really well as a hunter. And so later season, the animals a lot of times are more patternable. They're doing the same thing, like I said earlier. Every year they're going to feed in the same spots, generally speaking, and the need to scout is a little bit less, because you kind of know what they're going to do. They're predictable.
Yeah, I'll take that question just one step further, and selfishly it's asking for myself, but like I'm going down to Colorado this year, third season rifle mule deer. If it were you, say you have 6 days to hunt while the season's open, or would you go down a couple, maybe 3 days early and try and find a good buck and sit on him?
Yeah, that's a little bit different story. Colorado is kind of known for their shorter seasons, and you don't have the luxury of coming back if you don't get one.
Yeah.
And so that's a little bit different. A lot of times in our in Tag Hub and in our MRS, we tell people that if it's a shorter season, it's good to get down there maybe a day or two early, get the lay of the land. If nothing else, even if you're not specifically looking for animals, just by the lay of the land, you'll kind of understand where the animals are going to be. And then you right away, day one of the hunting season, you get to start hunting.
Well, and you get to see where other people are, you know, what trailheads are busy, where are guys setting camps up, where are guys, you know, already doing the same thing as you are doing, so that it's not as frustrating if you don't show up on opening morning and there's 57 trucks in the same spot you are, and you're all looking at one drainage that's 2 miles long, going, gosh, this is going to be hunting over top of each other. So that is kind of nice, you know, if you're in a situation like that where you go down there a day or two early and just get the lay of the land, understand, you know, where to get fuel, you know, what drainages come out where, you know, what it looks like and what activities going on. I had a situation this year, archery hunting, where I went in and went to scouted a couple days before just to see where I was going to set camp up and all that stuff. And I showed up when I showed up during season, and lo and behold, they had a trail run right where I was going to camp. Like, well, that's probably not going to work real well. There's 150 people running around on a 26-mile freaking run up here somewhere. So that, you know, just those types of things you want to keep track of, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good call for sure. Well, cool. That covers all those. We'll dive into, I want to show this video of your guys' online mule deer course real quick. It's about a minute long. And then if you guys have anything additional you want to talk about, I think this is really applicable for right now. A lot of folks trying to, whether it's find, you know, a nice mule deer buck or your first, or, you know, maybe you haven't hunted mule deer coming out west. I know this course would help you a ton. So I'll just play this real quick. It's like a minute long or a couple minutes long, and then let you guys kind of explain what this is. Cool. So do you guys want to give just a quick overview of what the mule deer course is, where folks can find it? Obviously the link here is where to find that. But just some background, like why you guys decided to create the course, etc. And actually, while you guys are doing that, somebody from onX on the back end will take that link and drop it into the chat for the folks attending.
Yeah, cool. So obviously knowledge is power, and the more you can learn, the better, you know, more successful you'll be. And we've learned a long time ago, I mean, that's what our company is built on, is helping hunters become better hunters through entertainment media, and not just our information, but other people's information. And, you know, we're kind of a collective in sharing ideas and thoughts and experiences. And the mule deer course, you know, we started with live lectures. My dad used to travel across the West in the 80s and 90s, and he would live lecture to people, and kind of like this, just he had to actually go to California. He couldn't sit in a room and talk to people and answer questions. And so then it evolved into books, and he wrote a number of books on elk and deer and antelope, on how to hunt them, you know, take a trophy of a lifetime. And it's evolved now. We have online courses. It's kind of an online book, and it's a little bit more interactive. It's more of, you know, being able to take a concept and say, okay, this is, you know, this is how or where the gear we use, or this is how or where we glass, and then actually show footage and show things digitally, so that those ideas are a little bit more concrete, a little bit understand a little bit better. The other thing is, you know, it's evolving. So it can be, you know, we could have 101 chapters and 8.5 hours of content on there. And we'll go through a fall and learn a couple of the things. We're like, well, we should put this in that section and this in that section. And so it allows it a living, breathing document that's getting better and better and better every year. Whereas with a book, once it's printed, it's done. You have to wait for version 2, which could be a decade. This thing's constantly evolving. It's a subscription based, and so you buy it for 1 year, and you can binge do it all in you can all do it in 8.5 hours, or you can do it over the course of time, and then you can come back to it and say, okay, I want to hit that glassing chunk again, or I want to hit that digital scouting thing again. So that's it. We have more than that coming down the pipe. We're hoping to do an elk one, an antelope one, possibly a bighorn sheep or a sheep one. So there's a bunch of this coming out, and it basically spurred from our team going, I want to share my knowledge. How do we do that? Do we write a book? I was like, let's do something better. So we've been working on it for a couple of years.
That's cool. No, really good stuff. Check it out. Again, we'll throw the link in the chat there. So we're gonna give away a bunch of, obviously rifle season is here or around the corner, and I'm personally hoping it starts to cool off and snow flies, and I'm gonna need a beanie here soon. So far I have not, but we're gonna give away a bunch of our orange onX beanies. And again, we'll throw the link in the chat here as well. Just takes 2 seconds, get your name in there. We're gonna be giving a bunch of these out to attendees as a thank you for tuning in. And then honestly, we have a ton of additional master classes coming up. I'm sure we'll at some point do some more with the Eastmans folks here. We've got everything from upland hunting to duck hunting to more elk stuff, dog training, you name it. We've got a ton of them. So check out the link. We'll throw that one in the chat as well for future master classes. All you have to do is sign up, and then we'll actually remind you, hey, we're a week out, we're a day out from this class you signed up for. Obviously, if you can't make it, no hard feelings. But check that out and get signed up for the ones you're interested in. And then with that, let's see, we've got about 10 minutes or so, and I'm going to run a few minutes late if you guys are, with some additional Q&A. Yep. Perfect. I'm going to try and stop. Everybody can see you guys a little more, and I'll go over to some more questions. Do you guys have any suggestions or resources to help find a hunting partner if you're new to an area, or if you typically hunt alone? Anything that you guys would recommend with that?
Hang out where hunters hang out. Yep. And if it's the gun dealer to the sportsman's warehouse shop to the archery shop to just hang out where hunters are. Go to the rifle range, go to the archery range. The other thing is careful what you ask. There's Dan, one of our guys, wrote an article a couple years ago about finding the perfect hunting partner, and one of the topics he talks about is don't be pushy. If you go up to some guys and get to know them, and you start asking specifics on hunting areas and specifics on gear and specifics, nobody wants to share their stuff with someone that's gonna abuse it and turn around and their friends are in there hunting the same spot. So just get to know them, take it slow, be a fly on the wall for a while. And guys are funny. We're a unique animal in the sense of, I'm not going to tell you where my secret crick is. That's going to be hard. So just be forewarned. Yep. For a while, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, or the one you hear a lot is, I'm not asking for your hunting spot, but just a general area. That too is one of the biggest turnoffs right away, But like you said, get to know them and offer, say, hey, if you happen to be hunting solo, or if you need help on a pack out, here's my number. Call me. I know if somebody or if I killed a bull or something and was in a pinch and needed help, and somebody came and helped, like, I would absolutely be willing to share some knowledge and share camp with that person. So go ahead.
You know, another tip is do a little of your own research. So when you ask a question, instead of saying, you know, where would you start? What creek drainage would you start or trailhead would you start in? Instead, go up to a couple trailheads, find one that you go, man, I think this one looks really good. Then ask a question. Hey, I was up at XYZ Secret Creek trailhead this last weekend, and I noticed that there's a bunch of tracks across the top of that. Do you think they're migrating out of there, or is that local herd just hanging out? Does that make sense? You're not asking specific. You're asking small questions, not what rock do I sit on the 15th of October in order to shoot a 200-inch mule deer. Those are different questions.
You know,
And you're doing some work.
yeah, and you know, it's like anything, any relationship that we're all in, it's about building up trust.
Yeah.
That takes time. You know, you're running a marathon and not a sprint. You don't want to just, you know, pimp everybody for their information and then desert them. And one of the best ways that I've seen in my life is, you know, getting involved in a local archery club or a local, nonprofit group, like say, you know, Mule Deer Foundation, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, whatever. There's a bunch of them. Get involved in those groups, and then you're showing you're an active participant, you're dedicated, and people, you know, want to help other people. It just takes time.
So they don't want to get taken advantage.
Yeah, I don't want to get taken advantage of, and just build up that friendship, make true, genuine friendships. And man, all those little tips and tactics for hunting spots or how-tos or whatever, they're going to come because people are going to want to share with you. So.
Definitely. Here's another good one, and this could be answered in a million different ways, I'm sure, but what's the most common mistake, newbie mistake that you see new hunters make? Is there anything that stands out, like maybe it's a story, like a hunt you guys were on with somebody new, that you just picked up on as a common mistake?
I think lack of understanding what the brevity of the situation they're in. Most people don't understand that they're in a survival state most of the time when they're hunting, and one or two bad mistakes can lead to serious problems. Even if it's right, you know, even if it's as simple as not understanding how big an elk is, and you get 9 miles back on your backpack, shoot a bull by yourself, and it's 80 degrees outside, you got a serious problem. You may not understand that, but you do. That's going to be spoiled meat. That's going to be, a butt kicker. And then you start making mistakes. So I'm gonna pack this really, really heavy, and you hurt yourself. Now you got a real problem. So it's just the brevity of it. And that's where hunting mentors and guys that they've been there, done that, bought the t-shirt can help. And so find a few of them. They're willing to help, just not instantly. I don't know. That's the brevity is a big thing. I've watched too many guys kill a freaking elk 6 miles back and on 2 guys, and it's try and pack the whole elk out by themselves.
Yeah, especially, I mean, it's really more important in the mountains. I mean, you see people that if they're hunting there as a non-resident, they're not used to hunting the mountains, or if you're new to an area, you just move out to an area and you think you're going to tackle the world or take on the world with your first elk hunt. It's a recipe for disaster. If you're just pushing things that, like we always say, if it feels like you're pushing a rope or you're swimming upstream or whatever analogy you want to use, it's probably because you are. You should rethink what you're doing.
Yep. Start small.
Definitely. And so one thing that kind of came to my mind when I read that, and it's not necessarily a mistake, but an area for new hunters, especially new rifle hunters, to maybe work on. And I'll throw my wife under the bus. The first couple years of hunting with her, or just any new hunter, a 12-year-old or new hunter, new adult onset hunter. One of the things that I have really noticed every time is, you're sitting there on the binos or the spotting scope, and you're like, yep, that buck he's stepping out. Okay, he's clear. And they're looking somewhere, 15 yards to the right of him through the scope. So one of the things that I would say is like an area to practice is take your rifle out preseason, and, you don't even have to throw a round in. You're not shooting rocks or anything. Just say, okay, that rock right there, get down, get on, like you're going to shoot that rock. Okay, now this rock, and just try and get that like target acquisition through the scope. Because so many times that was a frustrating point for me, trying to, you know, walk her or just a new hunter through a situation. It's like, what's the problem? Like he's broadside at 150 yards and they just can't find it in the scope, and it's hectic. So that's one thing that kind of came to my mind when reading that is just practice that ahead of time, get through that scope and say, okay, that tree right there, what do I need to do if I was to make a shot?
That's a great idea. The other thing we do is a lot of prairie dog hunting.
Yeah.
Take them prairie dog hunting because it's a live animal, and so it's disappearing, coming up, disappearing, coming up, disappearing, and so it's training them to target acquisition really quick and get that killer instinct. Be comfortable with, okay, I'm gonna take a life when I pull this trigger. I'm gonna take that. It's gonna happen, and that's a huge thing for new hunters. Is we call it the killer instinct. Just being able to do it quick and understand it.
Yep, definitely. This one's a pretty good question. What's the differences, if any, in the thermals behavior between snow-covered grounds and bare grounds? Do you see any differences with the thermals, the way they react in the mornings and evenings if there's snow on the ground?
Yeah, the ground doesn't warm up as quick, and so when you have snow on the ground, it doesn't create thermals like it does in September. The one downside that snow does is it creates reverse thermals sometimes, because you'll end up with an inversion. What an inversion does is it's colder down, lower, and warmer up, so that you can actually have a reverse thermal where the cold air's already sunk, and so the warm air is above, and you'll get what we call heat waves in the snow, and it's almost impossible to glass during heat waves with snow because everything turns white.
Yeah,
hopefully that answered that.
That was good.
Yeah, no, that's good stuff. How do you guys deal with moisture on optics when it's cold and wet? Do you treat them ahead of time or just wipe them as they fog up?
That is a great question. I wish I knew a great answer.
Me too.
Just remember that air movement fixes that. I have a pair of binoculars that comfortably I have to put the eye cups closer to my eyes, but if I do that, they fog up. And so if you learn which way the wind's blowing, pull the eye cups down, let the wind go across them. I wipe them as little as possible, because every time you do that, you risk scratching them, you risk wiping off the coating, because the optics have a coating on them, not just for moisture, but for clarity and a plethora of other things. And every time you wipe them, you risk taking that off. It's kind of like your Teflon pan, you know, that you cook on, and the more you mess with that, the more that Teflon gets worse and worse and worse. So I try not to do it. Sometimes it's impossible, and you just use a nice soft rag and don't use a dirty one.
And one way to minimize that too is, I know when I was younger, we would always take our optics and everything in the house. If we were camping, you know, we're staying in somebody's house or a cabin or a nice warm building or a camper. If as long as you feel secure about, you know, where it's parked, your vehicle and everything, just make sure everything's locked up, leave it out there, because then the optics are always at that temperature that you're going to be hunting at, you know, right away the next morning. We used to take our optics inside all the time, and then that's all you fight with for the first 2 hours is condensation.
Yep.
Smart tip. So this one here, we kind of touched, I can't remember if it was Ike or Guy, but one of you guys touched on this earlier, and I kind of want to dive a little bit further into it. So the question is, will tactics change in the late season due to moon phases? So when there's a full moon, one of you guys had said something about how they'll go to bed early, but they'll also come out early in the evening. Does that tend to be true, whether it's late season or the time of year?
Oh, I think Guy touched on that. Yeah, it definitely changes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the moon phases do change their behavior, you know, any time of the year, even in the summer, just because they're out more active at night, you know, because it looks like daylight to them because they can see so much better than us. But, you know, it's the most extreme during the ruts. So the elk rut, when you get that full moon, it's like, oh boy, that's a curse of death. And it can be with the mule deer rut as well. But late season, you know, it's just it's altering their feeding patterns a little bit. I mean, their body's a furnace. They have to, just like your wood stove, they have to put, you know, wood in there to burn, and it takes so long for it to burn off, and they need to go refuel that. So the later they stay out, the earlier they're going to have, you know, the earlier they go in the night before that morning, the earlier they're going to have to come out in the afternoon. Like I said, the colder it is, that collapses to where you get down. I've had some of these tags in December for elk hunts, like down in Nevada and Idaho, that are true late season. I mean, there's no question, that's the late season. And it's cold all day. And those elk those bulls will ride the thermals. They'll be up really high a lot of times on those mountains, but they'll be out almost all day. And I've seen them sometimes on the north side of a slope. I don't know why they don't go to the south side when it's not, where it's, you know, mostly clear, but for some reason they'll stay on the north side, belly deep snow, just all day feeding out in those basins and not even take the proverbial daytime nap. So it does affect them, especially when you get snow on the ground because it's so bright with the full moon. But for the most part, you know, late season, full moon, they're going to eat a lot at night, but also we're getting crazy weather that time of year too. So they got to strike, they got to make hay while the sun's shining, so to speak, because they could get snowed up and have to lay on in the timber for 2 or 3 days when a big snowstorm comes through, you know. So they're trying to take advantage of even moonlit nights to pack as much protein and feed into the furnace as possible.
Gotcha.
The best elk hunting late season is when it's really cold. I don't care what the other factors are.
Yep.
Really cold. I've had that late season elk tag in eastern Montana, and it is a very tough hunt until it gets 20 below. I've gone into that area where we struggled to find 6 bulls, came back later after Thanksgiving when it was 20 below, and there's 60 bulls.
The same.
You know, they're just same exact drainages. They were there the whole time. It's just 20 below. They don't have a lot of choices. It's go out and feed or go out and feed. That's their option. So it's just, you know, I always, when I'm late season, I'm looking at those weather patterns, and I want to not be out there when it's snowing because you can't see anything. It's a waste of your time, but I'm really keying in on those clear cold fronts that dip down out of Canada. It's going to bring us 10, 15 below zero. That is money. Even though it's brutal out there, it's brutal for them too. And it's really a huge advantage. I mean, you don't see a lot of deer seasons that time anymore. The old days they did, but there is quite a few elk seasons that late, and it's really, that's the money, the below zero.
Nice. Yeah, I'm hoping that we actually see that this year. Last year was pretty tough to find even below freezing. It was, I think, even late November, it was 40, 50 degrees for most of it up here. So I'm hoping let's do a couple more real quick questions and then we'll kind of wrap things up. Does your guys' mule deer course apply to anything with blacktails in the Northwest? Do you guys cover any blacktail, or, I mean, at least have some things in there that you can apply to it?
I don't know. I mean, deer, but blacktail are a unique, where they live and how they interact with each other and what they do are unique. I wouldn't say there's a ton in there.
No, I mean, maybe, yeah, some of the glassing equipment, the general tactics would apply, but as far as specific to blacktail, there's no specific information in there based purely on blacktail.
Yeah, we've done articles in the past, you know, tips and tactics on blacktail in the magazine and the blog, but no, I wouldn't say in the mule deer course there's a ton.
Yeah. Their behavior is very similar to mule deer.
Yeah, definitely. I would think, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of things even in that would apply to elk, you know, especially as you get late season glassing tactics and so on and so forth. So last one here, and again, most of these questions have a wide variant of answer, I'm sure, but how far do you think a bull will travel from his original rutting area? Is there like a typical, you know, that bull could travel up to 5 miles? Is he sticking closer, just finding, you know, more of a sanctuary close by? Or is a lot of times he getting up and just finding completely new country?
Oh, Guy, you want to tackle that? Well, maybe I'll add in a couple.
There's been, you know, fairly documented cases recently where they guys I know that are mostly guides and outfitters, in Nevada in particular, that there's in Arizona, very unique bulls that are one of a kind type bulls, and in Eastern Montana, there's not another bull on the planet at that time looks just like it. So they're 100% identifiable, unique. And they have tracked them going over 20 miles from their summer range to their rut, and then back to a different location for their wintering ground. So they can travel a lot. Elk are wanderers. Do not underestimate how far an elk will go. That's why,
How quickly.
yes. I'll give you some hate mail right here for you and I. Scouting is the most overused term in hunting ever. I have seen more guys do damage to their hunts with scouting than any other technique on the planet. I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but it's true. And especially with elk. Around here, I'll hear guys, oh man, I went up in August and found these huge bulls on this such and such mountain, and they're up to 12,000 feet. I'm going to go get them when it opens. I'm like, it opens October 1. Those elk may not even be in this county, those bulls by October 1st. And it's really true. So back to the scout, I scout country, not animals. If I find a big buck in my, scouting trip, I'll maybe try to, get in there on the opener and kill it. But for the most part, I'm scouting country, not individual animals for that reason. And the elk is a perfect example. They travel so far. And when they pull off those cows, they can leave and go 5 or 6 creek drainages over, or an entire mountain range.
Yeah.
They're done.
We were in, I was just in southern Colorado, and at the end of our hunt, I mean, it was crazy at the beginning of the hunt. And then it literally, they woke up one day and the elk were done bugling, just quit on the high country, just stopped. Not another bugle for 2 days. And we have a really unique bull on camera that was just whooping up on everybody. There was 30 bulls on this meadow, and he was just whooping the crap out of all these bulls. Quit bugling. 3 days later, I'm down in the low country, which has got to be 25 miles, maybe further than that. It's a 45-minute drive. Yeah, it's a 45-minute drive. That bull shows up in the meadow 25 miles down, shows up in the meadow the next day and starts rutting again. Different cows, different bulls. Because it quit up on the high country and was still going in the low country. He shows up on the meadow and starts kicking everybody's butt down there. And that's just what they do when they're done. They're just like a bunch of college kids. Just because that one bar is a sausage party doesn't mean there's not a bar over there that there's a bachelorette party going on. He's going over there. And when that happens in another, it's just wherever and whatever it is. Now, and then that bull will show up. The guys will tell me that bull will show back up in the high country, and that's where he'll winter. Same time. And they've documented it years and years and years.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, all really good stuff. I really appreciate your guys' time, and then everybody who took the time to tune in. Again, just a reminder, this will be on YouTube. We'll post it probably by tomorrow. Feel free to share it with some friends, rewatch if there's anything that you forget and you want to dive in. I know there's a couple spots where I'll periodically dive back in and see what you guys had to say about a few particular things as we move to the late season. And yeah, just thank you guys a ton for everything you do. We really appreciate the relationship, everything you guys do for hunting conservation, and good luck the rest of the season.
Yeah, thank you guys. Good luck out there. Love to see the stories. If you get something, send it over, and we'd love to run the magazines, and if nothing else, just look at them. Look at the photos. So good luck in the field, and I guess stay warm. Hopefully it gets cold.
Hopefully. All right. Take care. Thank you guys.